Morning.
Yeah, hello everyone, Nathan here.
I guess we can wait for a couple of more minutes to start. I guess
Sure,
some more
yeah.
participants will be joining.
Okay.
Hello everyone. Very good morning. Can someone please confirm if I am audible to everyone?
Yes, sir, you're audible. We can hear you.
Thank you. So the purpose of today's session is basically to conclude the learnings that are derived from this modern application development series of courses. That means it includes the modern application development first part and the second part, which you all are currently enrolled in. We will also be taking your doubts if you have any with respect to the project or to the course in general. And after that, we would like to hear the feedbacks from all of you regarding the course. So this is what we have planned for the today's session. I guess how we can start with the session is first take up any queries that you guys may have. Sir, would that be okay?
Or maybe we can do it slightly differently. Just put up that summary that I think we had, a couple of slides, right? Just to sort of recap what the course is about. And it looks like we have a small number of people in the group today, so I think anybody can just chip in and ask questions at any point. I don't know. I mean, I guess there are like some other exams going on today, right? I mean, at least like I got one other email from somebody saying that he had some exams and therefore would not be able to join this. But I think that's fine. In general, as we have always been saying, right? I mean, to the extent possible, we are trying to respond on discourse as well. So that's always a valid way of continuing the discussion. So today what we can do is, I think maybe just put up the the summary quickly, and after that we can just open it up, right? Any questions, either project or course or moving forward, anything that you have. So yeah, so if you can do that, Abhishek.
Sure.
Stage, if there's anything you wanted to add before that, it's fine. Otherwise, I just had a couple of slides as a summary.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, Abhishek. Yeah,
I'll present the slides. So is my screen visible?
yeah, it is. Right. So, the purpose of having this was more sort of just to guide the discussion than anything else. So it's not like there's anything new in these slides. It's just, as it says, an overall summary. Okay. So next. Yeah. So, this is sort of the week by week, what we did was we just sort of pulled out what was there in MAD 1 and MAD 2 and just put it out there, right? This, of course, you have been through all of the lectures, and to a large extent, we have also tried to motivate why we have gone through this process, right? But yeah, maybe just skip through to the next slide. This is MAD 2, right? I mean, as you can see, a large part, the first half essentially was about JavaScript, specific forms of JavaScript and how they can be used. And the second part, we started talking about other things, like, a little bit more about APIs, tasks, messaging, and so on. Okay. So if we take a step back, right, I wanted to just sort of take a step back and say, okay, what was the idea? Why did we sort of structure the course in this way? Okay. Next slide, Abhishek. So MAD 1 in some sense was trying to answer the question, how do you build an app? Okay. And the primary thing that we wanted to sort of bring out over there is, when you're looking at it as a developer, it's not just for an app, actually, it's for any kind of program, any system that you are building, right? This idea of separation of concerns is a good working principle. Okay. You want to separate out the parts that interact with the user. Okay, so that's the HTML and CSS and some extent JavaScript, right? All of those are involved with the user interaction, the user experience part of things. Then, of course, you have some actual logic that needs to be performed, which is, how do I respond when a user wants to do something? How do I take inputs from a user? How do I basically interact with them? Okay, that's the logic part. And finally, you are doing all of this with some concept of a data model behind the scenes, right? There is some data that you are manipulating. Okay. So this idea of separation of concerns was something core that we wanted to bring out, right? And which is why we spent the initial time in MAD 1 basically talking about the MVC architecture, right? I mean, you can call it either a design pattern or a collection of design patterns. It doesn't matter what you call it. It's a way of thinking, right? So MVC, as we also saw, is not by any means the only way or necessarily even the best way of designing something, right? People will tell you that, there are, the MVC is not really the right fit for the web. There is something else. But at a sufficiently high level, all that it's telling you is, look, at least think about how you are structuring your app and separate it out into different parts. Okay, so that you can concentrate on developing one at a time. And you should be able to swap out one part of it. So for example, if you have written your logic in Python and at some point you find that you need to rewrite it in Golang or something just for speed or efficiency, then it should be possible to do it without really touching your data model or your user interface, right? And that's possible the moment you have separated out your structure that way. Okay. So MAD 1 was to a large extent about that. Of course, the question is, why did we choose the web in the first place, right? Which is why, why is it app development versus application development? Is there even a difference, and why should we think about it? App is primarily, associated with the web and mobile systems. It is what we have today. Whereas application, the word application sort of tends to refer more to the larger desktop applications. Having said that, there's no clearly defined, demarcation saying this is an app, this is an application. It's all just convention, right? I mean, people talk about it in a certain way and you understand from that. Why did we choose the web? Because it's currently the best sort of platform, device, vendor, neutral way of addressing the issue of developing an app. Okay, there there are good arguments in favor of actually building native applications, designing something specifically for a particular desktop or a particular mobile platform. But what we wanted to do was focus more on the concepts. Okay. Sorry, I mean, somebody has mentioned echo. I don't know. I mean, I'm hoping things are clear enough. And it looks to me that everyone else is muted. So yeah, let me know if it's unclear and I need to change something. So MAD 1, like I said, was about the separation of concerns. Of course, there was this question about why did we choose the web in the first place? Hopefully, we have done a reasonable job of justifying that. And a major part of what was there in MAD 1 after the separation of concerns was this idea of APIs, right? Now, why do we need to think about APIs? Why do we need to understand what an API is, right? An API is essentially the core to building a distributed system with a platform like the web. Okay. Now, to understand this a little better, you probably need to go back across the whole history of computer science and how systems were developed, right? Initially, you just had a single machine on which everything was being run. Okay. But at some point, people started saying, okay, I have multiple machines. I should be able to distribute work across them. And therefore, distributed systems came into the picture. When I have a distributed system, I then have to answer the question of how do I issue a function call from one place and get it answered by some other machine or some other server somewhere. Okay. And as we sort of took that forward all the way to the present day and the web, the best way that we have of thinking about it is to basically think in terms of APIs, right? So an API in some sense is a way of a remote procedure call, but with some very specific sort of restrictions on it. In particular, we have this idea that because the web protocols are stateless, right? Whereas original remote procedure calls were designed in such a way that the client and the server knew exactly what each other was doing. APIs had to be designed for the web in such a way that they take the structure of the web into account. The fact that there is a separation between the client and the server does not maintain the state has to be sort of sent by the client along with each request, all of that, right? Which is essentially sort of the foundation of the concept of REST. So this was what MAD 1 was all about, right? It was sort of telling you what are the core ideas in how you develop an app and what are the things you need to understand in order to build an app for the web platform. Okay. Next slide. MAD 2 essentially sort of built on top of that. How do you build a better app? Okay. And the main thing that we are trying to address over there is how do we bring interactivity, meaning that it should be more, it should feel like an app. It should feel like an application that the person is using completely for themselves, right? And the way to do that, of course, is JavaScript, right? JavaScript is what essentially enabled that entire approach over there. So we spent quite a bit of time talking about JavaScript and some of these ideas like declarative programming and how you can sort of just say what you want and the system figures out how to make it happen, right? It's a very powerful idea. It's just at the end of the day, it's a different form of programming. But if you can do this kind of declarative programming structures, right, it can make the way that you code a bit easier. Whatever could have been done with a declarative programming style, so what we see in Vue.js with the binding and so on, could have been achieved in other ways. It's just that it makes it easier for you to sort of understand and implement certain things. So that interactivity, how do we add interactivity was one of the main things in MAD 2. Then came, how do we improve the structure of the app, right? In general, how does this interactive front end start interacting with other APIs at the back ends, right? How do you interact with multiple APIs, not just something that you yourself have implemented? What is this idea of the UI state, the visual state that is actually presented to a user? How do we manage that kind of state? How do we present multiple different views? How do we use routers in order to sort of manage different views that are present in a system, right? All of that essentially is part of building a more sort of usable app. And along with all of this comes the thing, okay, how do we sort of expand out from there, right? You need a lot of support to get an app that does something more than just interact with a user. you need to be able to run tasks in the background. You need to be able to message between the different servers that are doing the different parts of your work. And things like webhooks, right, also allow you to have some kind of extensibility of the basic functionality by allowing you to have ways of transferring messages, transferring information between different servers. Okay, so that was sort of the core idea behind MAD2. Essentially, if you think about it, it's all about how to build a better app. You already know how to build an app, but you want to have more functionality, you want to have a larger scale, you want to have a better structure, you want to have interactivity. Those are the things that come out in MAD2. Okay, and yeah, so just moving forward, can you just go to the next slide? Yeah, this is by no means the end. At best, all that we have done is given you some of the high level ideas behind how you might go about the idea of developing an app, right? But this is an area which is rapidly evolving. So literally it's at a point where, I mean, within the course of this MAD2, in fact, we found that Vue 2 was replaced by Vue 3 as the default version of Vue to use, right? Why did we decide to go with Vue 2 when it was fairly clear that Vue 3 would be coming up soon? Because at the time when we started the course, Vue 2 documentation and support on places like Stack Overflow and so on was still better than for Vue 3. But by the time we reach the end of the course, Vue 3 is been replaced as the default. Okay, and there is sufficient documentation that you could argue that it should be Vue 3 based. Having said that, that's why we also stuck to sort of the core concepts, right? What is reactivity? What is declarative the programming style, right? Things of that sort, which basically don't change when you go to between Vue 2, Vue 3, or any other platform really that allows you to have this kind of thing. My point is the technology itself is developing very rapidly. So rather than saying, okay, this is the correct way of doing certain things, all we can do is sort of give you ideas and you sort of build on top of that. Okay. We also mentioned a little bit about scaling, right? How do you do performance analysis? How do you do scaling? How do you design for scalability? Things of that sort. But for those of you who are interested in really going down that path, there is a whole other fields called, which is usually referred to as Devops, right? Which basically talks about how do you sort of orchestrate different services that talk to each other, maybe manage them using different containers, have multiple different services that are talking to each other, and all of them together constitute an app. Okay. Now that is a fairly complicated set of tools and techniques in itself, right? And it's in fact evolving so rapidly that I would say that even teaching a course about it is difficult. The only way you can really go about it is pretty much by trying things out and working with the technologies and seeing how you learn from it. Okay, but that in some sense is what you need to do if you are really interested in going further down this field. Having said all that, right, that line at the bottom is something I would like to emphasize. You don't build an application for the sake of building an application. Right? You build an application to solve a problem. Right? Now that problem might be something simple that only applies to yourself. Okay, so the idea of flashcards in the last semester, and in fact, if you look at this time's MAD1, the quantified self app, right? Both of those are things that nobody's talking about building something which is basically going to be changing the world. These are problems that maybe you as an individual find could be useful for you. Okay. And therefore you decide that, okay, can I build an app to solve this problem? And essentially what we are trying to show you is that, yes, it's not all that hard, okay, that you can do it. Now, how do you go from there to an app that basically multiple people would want to use, that can actually scale, that might actually become the next big thing, so to say, right? I have often felt that too many people sort of are trying straight away to design the next big thing without knowing how to build the next small thing. Okay, don't jump into something before understanding what the problem is that you are trying to solve. Okay, so what I would really encourage all of you to do is, now you have a set of skills, you have some tools available to you. And the way that you need to think about it is, how do I use these tools in order to solve problems that I might find interesting, or that others might have found interesting and have basically discussed with me at some point. Okay, so that essentially, the reason I wanted to just go over this is to put a little bit of perspective on what this course was about, why we structured it the way that we did, and also to sort of give you a better idea of how you should be thinking about the content of this course. Okay. Now that's basically it from my side. Tej, if you would like to add anything, please go ahead. And I think after that we can take questions from the students.
I think we lost Nitin.
Hello, can you hear me, Tej? Hello, Tej.
Yes, Nitin.
Yeah.
Here now.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just saying, that was it from my side. I just wanted to wrap up over here. If there's anything you wanted to add, please go ahead. Otherwise, we can take questions from the students.
No, I think you're covered everything that needs to be. We can take up questions.
Sounds good. So, yeah.
At some point, I would like to share that this diagram of the stack that we have built over 2 terms so that they know what falls where. Maybe we can just share the diagram on the discourse.
Sure. Yeah, I think that would be nice. I mean, I think, some kind of a thing like that, just to sort of give them retrospective, so to say, saying that, okay, this is why we did the course in this way and this is where you are. I think it's important for all of you to also think of it from that point of view to make sure you understand why things are being done in a certain way.
Right. Yeah. We can take questions.
So Pritodeep has raised his hand. So shall I ask him to?
Sure. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Good morning, sir. Am I audible?
Sure. Yes, you are. Good morning.
Yeah, sir. Firstly, thank you for taking the slides all the way from Mad 1. It just shows the continuity in the 2 courses. My question is related to the word DevOps. I've been hearing this ever since, I've been hearing this for many years, but I still don't know what it actually means. Can you slightly elaborate on that, sir?
I can take it up, Nitin.
Yeah, sure. I was about to say that actually. Sure, go ahead.
So I think once upon a time, there were 2 separate roles, like, developer wants one separate role and a system admin was a separate role. What would developer do? He would actually build the application in his local system and hand it over to a system admin who would deploy it in the system and make it available for the rest of the world. So those were 2 completely separate roles, and over the time, the roles have kind of come together in a way that you can't really separate them today, and that role sometimes is given the name DevOps. How they've come together, for example, today as a developer, you can't just develop and hand it over code to someone else saying you go ahead and deploy. From the beginning, you need to think about how this is going to get deployed, what tools that we are going to use it in deployment, what operating system are we going to use it to deploy, or even what hosting provider we are going to use it to deploy. And that's where developers are forced to think about deployment. Now on the other side, system as admins once upon a time used to set up 1 or 2 machines and deploy, and it used to be mostly manual process. Somebody would SSH and log in, deploy things and stuff like that. Today it has moved from there and it gone into a phase where you don't do it manually, you actually script that too, in the sense you code how an application has to be deployed. And sometimes the term that is used for this is infrastructure as code. You can search for that term, where you would actually, instead of doing manually the deployment, because the deployments are happening continuously, like it happens as soon as the developer pushes the codes to JIT or Git, and as soon as the tests pass, it should automatically get deployed, which is what we call continuous integration and continuous delivery. So in that way, when that has become the reality, that you can't have a man or a woman deploy it continuously, like every 5 minutes or every 10 minutes, as and when the new features come in. So system admins were forced to learn programming and also to automate the process of deployment, observation, maintenance, backup, and stuff like that. So in a way, what they were doing manually was actually was becoming automated and they had to start doing programming. So they started learning Python to do system administration. I mean, they started with shell programming, then they moved to Python. And today a lot of code is written in Python or as configuration in YAML to do like your system administration. So you can see that, both developer role and the system admin role are coming together and getting like, mingled, and they're becoming one role. And that role is called DevOps. So, and why it is called DevOps? Still because it's kind of a niche area where you need to know programming and you need to know system admin to build these newer systems and deploy them across the world for scalability. And does that explain the DevOps role as such?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thanks for the detailed explanation. Just a small follow-up question. Is it correct to say that the DevOps term is sort of a portmanteau of development and operations, something like that?
Yeah, it is. It is a combination of developer plus operations person.
All right, sir. All right,
It is
got
a
it.
combination. Yeah, that's how
Sir,
the term came.
yeah, okay. Thanks for that answer, sir. I have a second question. That we actually we have a modern application development wiki that Abhishek sir posted on the Mad1 discourse forum. He's posted a link to that. Going forward, can we expect it to include Mat2 concepts as well, and will we have access to it as we pass out of this course?
So the wiki is a public wiki. It'll all, I mean, everybody will be able to access it all the time. I don't think we'll put it under the behind the wall as such. So
Okay,
you
okay.
should be able to access it anytime. And the idea of wiki is not to cover what we cover in the course, but to probably add to it or cover things outside of it.
Yes, sir.
Yes, there could be some concepts related to MAD2 or even concepts that are not part of MAD1 and MAD2, which are probably relevant. Will be on wiki. Yes.
Got it, sir. Got it. Thanks for the responses, sir.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a couple of things. So, like Tej said, right, in the past, the system administrators would basically be probably handling some kind of a Unix type server, probably Linux, but something of those of that sort. And the developer would then have to sort of give the code to them. The system administrator needs to install it and so on. And now, of course, the developer needs to be aware of that as well, right? You need to sort of know how to sort of construct your entire, possibly either a container or something like that. So this is where, to some extent, a little bit knowledge of Linux helps, right? It is possible to to do a reasonable amount of app development without sort of going deeper into Linux. But after a while, you'll just find that it hampers you, right? I mean, having some knowledge of the Linux core, what kind of apps, the services can be installed on it, how you can sort of manage different systems, how do you get the scripts and things of that sort going, right? Definitely helps. So to some extent, that system commands and Linux and Git course, all of those are sort of important side requirements, so maybe co-requirements of a course like application development, right? Having said that, it's difficult for us to sort of make it a hard prerequisite, okay, or something like that, which is why we sort of said, okay, it's a prerequisite. You are strongly advised to try and do that as well. But in any case, I think you should sort of have that in mind, that having that kind of background knowledge will definitely help with solving many of those kind of issues. Okay, so that's just a side thing that I wanted to mention.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. And I think the fact that it's a recorded screencast on Ubuntu, and that also gave us some exposure on the exact commands that we need for building our apps. So that was also a great initiative.
Sure, and I mean, if you think about it, there's a reason why he is using Ubuntu, right? You could potentially do this on directly on Windows, for example. Yeah. Although I don't think he uses Windows, so that's a different story. But it would be much harder, because even on Windows today, the reason why the Windows platform is sort of becoming fairly popular is because of WSL, right? The Windows subsystem for Linux. Sir. So effectively what they are doing is they are putting a Linux machine on top of your Windows platform and saying, use this for the development aspects, right? And, this just has to do a lot with where they came from. Windows was primarily started out as a single user a personal computer, so to say, right? And all the development around that was based on that. Whereas Linux from the beginning was meant as a multi-user server kind of environment, where you had to sort of be able to write scripts and things in order to get your work done. Okay. And of course, a related thing apart from knowing about Linux is Git, right? And that I think is actually crucial at this point, right? So even if you look at something like the Wiki, which is being maintained, and as Tej said, our intention is definitely not only to keep it open, but also keep updating it, which means that, you know, we would really like to see inputs from all of you as well about what are the parts that are missing that need to be added. Is there any way you can think of structuring it? If you have ideas on it, you know, you're free to discuss it with us. The final call will probably have to be by one of us over here because we are the ones sort of maintaining it long term. But having said that, we definitely need your inputs in order to find out what are the gaps that need to be filled. And as you know, this wiki itself is hosted on GitLab right now, right? It may move to GitHub, but right now it's on GitLab. And you know, so once again, the same thing, the same principles of how to use Git, how to manage a project with that, how to sort of make pull requests and so on is something that can be done even in the context of the wiki.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Thanks for the response.
Anyone else having any other questions? Yes, Kumar, please.
I said good morning. Actually, there was a lots of interesting question, but due to the time constraint, we couldn't ready because today's exam and many things. So I think I'm missing this session that way. So, but I want to say something because throughout the session we learned a lot without any doubt. So, and combination, the sir, this sir, and this sir, the combination is very fantastic. Whatever I observed that. So, and through that journey, we felt some problem as the developer. So it is apart from that, what we tools we develop and something. So in general, some problem we face. So can I raise this problem as a developer?
Sure. I mean, you are saying that you have a question right now about the usage of tools. I think we can take that if there aren't any other questions at the moment. Yeah,
yes.
I think it's fine. Sure.
So there is a 3-4 things whenever we develop that. The first, so whenever we develop when we start this particular developing app, that is not a problem. We start anyhow. And when our project grow and at some time level, we need to change that our project. That is big problem comes there because the time we starting the project, we don't think. We only think our project is working or not. And so whatever the tools is there, we fit somewhere and we try and error type of thing and hit and try type of, and it's fit somewhere, some project, some tools, and it is working. But the problem comes whenever suddenly we need to change. So like that in the last semester, there was a project, same flashcard, and we developed on the Jinja template. And suddenly this year it's using the API. So many students start facing the problem, how it is happening. So what here I had some solution was there. Past 7 months, I was trying to reorganize that thing, and I come up with the one solution to reorganize that any complex web in particular format. And but I'm not sure that how much I'm right, because in the book somewhere I have read that there is a two mainly type of the format we follow. One is the functional way we design the entire way. One is the divisional way we design that. So divisional way has divisional way. Particular, they say that author that okay, we can complex way we can handle through that. But whatever I feel that both of is not working fine. Both of, because that sometime at some instant we using the many tools, and out of that many divisional component in the wave, particular component go huge and particular is a small. So how to manage this? So at the end, I designed that the organized entire wave as that tree structure. The same like that we computer folder, and I use that packaging that system. So where it is happening, any the tree node, anyone can talk anything. So what is the benefit of that? At any moment of time, I can add a particular component, I can delete a particular component. So it is working fine, but I'm not sure that how much I'm correct. So what will happen if the every module is importing the some component in that case? For example, in the as Nitin sir was telling in the one Vux estate management type of thing, how they jump in the new strategy that when the component is going so high. So that time I realized that why not this thing can be done in the entire backend of the Flask, and I tried to restructure the entire Flask module in the form of the whatever the it is written view, and it is working fine. So in that case, what's the benefit I got? So whenever I need to add any component, I don't have to do much more coding, don't have to change any other coding, just I'm adding as the input and output, only that much. So my question is there here. So whatever the method I created over the 7 months through the journey, so is that how much it is the sufficient and how much it is useful? And we can, if it is the useful, then why not industries or someone using like that, or what type of industries using the idea to develop when they're scaling the website more and more?
That's a good question, Kumar. I mean, I'll just give it a quick shot at answering at least what I understood from it, and then maybe Tej can add a bit more. I'm not sure I understood exactly how you have structured your project, but I guess the main point is that after going through by looking at what you were finding difficult, you were able to sort of refactor and reorganize your code in such a way that right now you have a better structure. Okay. Now,
yes,
the problem that comes about in something like this, and it's something that I've been trying to convey throughout the course, but to varying degrees of success, because it's not always easy to bring it out clearly in something. What works for one project or for one person, in general, it's very difficult to generalize and say that, this is the way to do it. Okay. And what I mean by that is the way that you go about approaching a problem depends on many things. One of them is how big is the project, right? Is it something that requires like really complex APIs, or is it a fairly simple data model? In that case, you might want to structure your code in a certain way. Now, if you have complicated state and you require Vuex and something like that in order to manage the state, then you probably need to change the way that you structure the UI part of the thing. If you find that you are having complicated state like that, then you might find that even the backend needs to be changed, right? Because after all, now there are multiple models that need to be managed over there. Now, while doing all of this, you also have another problem that, let's say you are working on your own, you will have a certain style of working. But what if there are two people working on the project? Now you need to have a Git workflow that also works along with this, right? You need to decide who is allowed to change what. And in that case, you basically want to make sure that you can split up your project in such a way that one person can work on one part of the project without really affecting what someone else is doing. Scale that up further. Let's say that it's not a 2% project, but a 100% project that you're talking about, right? How do I manage something of this sort? Let's say the entire code base corresponding to Facebook, right? So there is a user interface, there are like timelines, there are widgets, there are the friend networks, there are APIs. There are like so many moving parts over there. Each one of them needs to be put together. When you get hit that level of complexity, once again, you need to reorganize your code. Okay. So the problem is that the question, okay, how should I organize my code in order to develop it properly, depends on all of these things. Not only that, it also depends on where you are coming from. Let's say that you are a person who has got a lot of experience developing C type code, okay, maybe numerical computations, things of that sort. you have a certain viewpoint from which you are writing your code. You structure your code in a certain way. Okay. And certain things come naturally to you. Maybe the way that you organize things into libraries, you construct some kind of a build system around it. All of that comes in a certain way. So even if you are using Python Flask, you tend to think along those lines. Instead, if you are someone who's coming from a Lisp background, right, functional programming or Haskell, then you will find that the way that you look at the entire problem changes. You sort of are thinking about composable components. You are thinking about how you can have functions and how should you write them in such a way that they can compose neatly without any side effects, right? The entire approach that you take in order to even think about your code, your models, everything will be different. This is sort of the reason why there is no single answer saying that, okay, look, this is the right way to organize a particular course. So what we tried, and I think what Tej had as some of the template examples that he gave are good starting points for relatively simple projects. But now if you take that same starting point and say you want to build a really large project with like 5 people working on it, you will probably find that some significant changes are required, right? Because each person is coming from a different point of view. That's not to say that, I mean, there are of course some methods that are better than others, right? And where possible, we have sort of tried to point out at least, okay, saying, okay, this works or this doesn't work, or, don't do certain things in a certain way, right? Just wherever we feel that, okay, something is a bad idea, we'll try and mention it. But beyond that, it's difficult to really say, okay, this is the best way of doing something. Okay. So to answer your question, okay, what exactly is the right way? I mean, is there anything wrong with what you did? No, absolutely not. You have to find a method that works for you, okay, and sort of see how it scales. But the bottom line is you should not be afraid of having to rewrite your code. Okay, and I think in any sort of reasonable, I mean, any system where you are involved in writing a significant amount of code, at some point you will go through iterations where you have to just, I mean, you might have to just rip up the whole thing and rewrite it from scratch. Okay. I mean, believe me, these are like small projects that you're looking at for a course over here. I had to do this 2 times during my PhD. Okay. So I literally got to a point where I had painted myself into a corner writing some code for this. And I had to essentially just junk the entire code and rewrite it from scratch. Okay. And this was some C++ code using some crazy libraries that were not even properly supported, but it happens. Okay. And just imagine, I mean, that's like a pressure situation because you basically want to graduate as fast as possible. Okay. Of course, I mean, there are pressure situations in deploying an app as well, but that's the point. What I'm saying is you need to decide when you need to go through such a process, right? And that unfortunately comes only from experience, right? It can't be taught. So yeah, I think over time you will find that, okay, the best way of handling things like that. Yeah, with regard to structuring the thing, I mean, I don't know, Tej, if there's anything else you would like to add, please.
If you allow, then I can share the code for the 2 minute, so you can see that, and it will be better to understand there.
Okay, let me give another perspective. Then maybe we can think about looking at the code and doing other things. I mean, see, software engineering as such, what you're talking about is software engineering, right? It's not a part of any framework or development. It's not even part of the web development, or or you're writing a Python batch application or any other thing. This is architecting a software engineering, and it's still a field that is still under development. It's not like there is a golden answer to it. And the second thing, what you need to know is a software project is never complete. And that's what we wanted to imbibe in saying that, we could have told that, you start this project from the fresh and, write it separately. But we didn't say that. We wanted you to continue from where you left in the last term, only to realize that, what you could have done in the part 1 better. And now what you could have done in the part 1 better is very different for each person. It could be one answer for you, and it could be a very different answer for me. And when I do the enhancement is generally what we call in the industry, when you do an enhancement on the existing project, that's when we come to know the defects or the inefficiencies or what could have been done better in the part 1. And this is normal in the industry. You are not you're not facing something out of ordinary, and that's not, to tell you that you've done something completely wrong in the part one. It happens very often. It happens all the time. And when you wrote part two, that's when you actually realize, oh, I could have done this better in the part one. Now when you go out write somewhere else, you have some knowledge of, if I have to build upon this project, if I have to take this and maintain this project for about 10 years, how will I build the base? And that knowledge is very different for each of the project type and each person. And that's what you have learned actually by doing restructuring your code. And that's one of the purpose of the course. And I'm glad that you were able to do it. And you could also see that these migrations or this software development is never an easy. You could have seen, I mean, uh, most of you would have heard news of at least how the income tax department's software migrations went through certain problems, right, when they migrated from the older system to newer upgraded system. Now in that thing, either they could have completely overwritten the newly written the whole thing, or they could have done just the enhancements. For all purposes, they could have done um, the just a change of the UI. But the whole thing faced so much difficulties, because even for a larger project with lots of people and lots of experts, migrating or moving into the next level is not an easy thing, and it's something that you need to learn. And I'm happy that you were able to learn, and that's one of the reasons why we focus so much on continuing on the project and not building it from the from the fresh again. Yeah. um,
Yes, sir. Whatever your screencast was there, I tried to follow up, and I didn't do anything extra. Just I tried to enhance that, and apart from that, whatever through that screencast, some idea you was telling, something extra you was telling, I tried to experiment that, and what I felt throughout the journey, that whenever I create one project, it is not a big deal. I can make it. But the problem comes suddenly. A new idea comes, a new problem I want to solve on the real world, and I want to, and to solve the real world, the one other problem. I'm not going to develop another website. I'm trying to think that. So whatever the problem I think, I should be capable to merge everything in the all together somehow. So somehow I achieved that thing the many way. And also one thing, Nitin sir will believe or not, but sometime in the lecture, his one statement itself was able to solve my the so many months back problem. I was struggling how to think, but suddenly some statement he say in the lecture, and I say simply, wow, we can think, I try to experiment, and it's worked very nicely. I don't know how much I able to convey that how a structure is there, but if you allow me 2 minutes, I didn't show anyone this the web structure. Then I can show you right now in the after sharing my screen. So how I thought and how I restructured the entire thing, and I think that it can even the scale up to the even the 100 people team is working together, or the more than 100 also, because I every moment I try to keep everything so separate, so independent, and just I'm connecting like a plug system. So whenever at certain moment I want to cut the some product, I don't have to change any code anywhere. Just I need to plug it, plug out, and plug in. That type of a structure I tried to make that, and it took a long time to experiment and thinking. So if you allow, I can show you.
Oh, Kumar, I think and that sounds very nice. Only just a couple of things. I mean, it might be nice if we can maybe take this on discourse. And the reason I'm saying that is two things. One is we want to make sure that others also get a chance to ask any questions. And the second thing is, I suspect that, I mean, it took you quite a while to come up with this idea. So I'm sure that it will take time for people to also absorb it. And I think given the fact that there are other exams today, I think a lot of people might be, also concerned that, okay, we don't want to sort of get caught in this for too long, right? So I think it is something that should not be done in a hurry. It would definitely be nice to have it, and this would be great to have on this course, right? Definitely something that I think would be a nice discussion there. So
Okay, sir.
yeah, maybe
Yeah,
we can.
and also
Yeah.
you could probably record like a small screencast and add it on the discourse if you think talking is better than actually writing. You could probably record like a minute or 2 minute video and put it on discourse. That's also
Sure.
fine.
Yeah, I think that's a nice way of conveying.
I will try, sir. Actually, one of the colleague who was struggling lot from the last project and something doing how to modify it and them trying to modify it and add something. Then I saw that his project for a 5 minute, and I told you don't have to do anything change in the coding. And I just on that his coding doesn't matter how the code he built. I just know the connection overview, how the Flask overview thinking. I just add some extra module and add something, and his entire functionality is working nicely without changing a single code. So I thought that I try to think that how overall Flask is thinking, and even I'm making the tree structure, but at the end I'm thinking that Flask is one thinking at one place everything. So just I thought keep this idea in my mind, and I just create one connection like that. So connection cut here and the very good. I finished everything. No need to think the coding modifying here and here. And people is saving his time for the bugging everything from the beginning. That's
Great. I will look forward to your video or on the note on the discourse, and then like we usually do, we can continue on the discourse there.
okay. Sir.
Absolutely. Yeah, sounds good. Yeah. Other questions? I've seen a hand raised before, but I don't know. No.
Yeah, it was my hand, but I think I'll wait. If somebody else has a question, then I'll come back.
Sure. Yeah, I think you can go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, okay, thank you, sir. My question, actually, this is not related to the slides that you just showed, or it's just a general question related to app development. A couple of days ago, I was going through the annual developer survey of Stack Overflow, and I was actually surprised to see that SQLite is currently number 3 among all the database systems, because I had a notion that SQLite was mainly for production, and it was a quite light database, like just how its name is. So can you explain me why SQLite is so popular? Because I never thought it would be actually used in production environments.
Yes, it is very popular. So there are different databases have different properties, right? And some databases are very popular in multi-user mode, and some databases are very popular in the single-user mode. SQLite is one of those databases which is very popular in the single-user mode. For example, all the data on your Android phone or your iOS phone are like mostly stored in an SQLite database. When you see your contacts in the iPhone or Android, or you see lots of Android projects and iOS projects use SQLite as the database, right? And that itself should give you the number of instances it's been deployed. And if you go to SQLite, actually the website sqlite.org, and look at their use cases, they actually tell you what use cases you should use SQLite and what use cases you shouldn't use SQLite. For example, one of the things they say is like, don't use SQLite where there is lots of writes from multiple users. But
Okay.
if it's a lots of reads from multiple users, then it's a great database. One example that could be is your personal blog, right? If you're writing a personal blog, like say single user personal blog project, then one user who writes to the project is you. There are not many writers actually. Even if there are commenters, there are very few. But there are lots of readers, and SQLite is a great database for that. But now let's say if you're actually building a e-commerce website, and where there are lots of transactions going and lots of reads and writes are happening at the same time, SQLite may not be a great source because it's not ideal for lots of transactions parallelly happening, because it's a single thread. It will get locked up. So there are use cases where SQLite is very popular. Of course, you can use it in production. It's a production grade database, but depends on the use case.
Okay, okay. Sir, this actually came up in one of the last lectures. I think week 12, week 11 or something. Is SQLite thread safe?
Not really. It is thread safe, but it gets locked. I mean,
Okay.
it won't. It's like a file. Uh, Basically, SQLite is a file, right? There will be a file lock
Yeah.
when one of them is writing. Then it won't allow other one to write. So if you really want to do it, you'll have to handle that and then retry.
Correct.
So
So I think, see, technically, when you say thread safe, what you are saying is that if something is not thread safe, the implication is that it is possible for multiple threads to try and write to it, and they could actually end up giving different answers depending on the order in which they perform. But as Ted said, usually SQLite, what it will do is it will just lock. So what you will have, it will still give you correct output. It's just that it will become slow because it will necessarily serialize your operations one after the other.
okay, okay. So in the context of, say, for example, a small application like our flashcard app that we're doing for the project, if we try to log in multiple users and make them do read-write operations at the same time, it will necessarily be a serial operation. No parallelism is allowed.
Yeah.
See, I mean, technically yes, but it also depends on how fast you're writing and how fast you're releasing the connection, and also how many parallel writes. For example, if you are like having, let's say, 5 users trying to write parallelly, and for a file system that is running on an SSD, the writes are really quick. You won't probably realize, and you may not face the problem. But now if you scale that to like 100,000 users, or like maybe even 1,000 users, then you might face a difference. So it's like a at some point it will break, but it may not be 5 users or 10 users.
Exactly. I think you need to have this whole idea of what we mean by multi-user, right? Like Ted said, I mean, we sort of sometimes tend to underestimate how fast computers are, right? I mean, just imagine 1 microsecond is like 1,000 clock cycles, right? And 1 millisecond is 1,000,000 clock cycles on a computer, right? And I mean, as for 1 millisecond for a human being, I mean, no, you haven't even started blinking your eye. Forget about actually a blink of an eye, right? So I think 5 users and all that, you won't even notice it. It'll just look as though everything is happening immediately. But as I said, it depends on what you are doing. If you have some things which are writing a whole lot of data and actually end up doing a bad job with the database, you can run into trouble. Because at some point, that the fact that it's a single file will hit you. But unless you really start scaling to large number of users, you're unlikely to see problems of that sort.
Yes, sir. Got it. Got it. Thanks for the responses, sir.
Sure.
Do we have any other questions? Anyone?
So I just pasted a link in the chat called when to use Sqlite. It's actually published by the Sqlite site. It's a great page. It kind of takes you to through the use cases where you could use Sqlite and where you should use client server kind of database like MySQL or Postgre. I think it's a great page to go through it.
Sir, do you mind if I repost this in discourse for others to see?
Go ahead.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
And yeah, I mean, when you're developing lots of applications which are internal to Office in I had a small startup where about 30 people, and lots of internal tools that we use have the databases as SQLite because it's easy to develop, easy to deploy, easy to back up because it's just copy paste the file, it's backed up, and easy to maintain. And for 30 people, it works really well as a database instead of maintaining another server or another client server. So there are many use cases where just SQLite would suffice. Thank you. That's it.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that point that Tej made, see, with SQLite you don't have a separate server, right? It's just a file that's sitting over there, and directly your Python code is communicating with that. Now, actually, this whole DevOps business that I had mentioned, right? Nowadays, you actually start seeing things like Kubernetes and Docker and various things, and people are talking about orchestrating large applications. And I mean, you look at Kubernetes, I've tried many times to sort of understand it properly, and invariably struggle with the thing, right? I mean, there are this whole concept of pods and manager, and there is a there are proxies, and the whole sort of setup is a fairly complicated thing, right? Which is why I would never recommend something like that for a single person project, right? It may make sense, maybe at least as a learning process, it might actually make sense to take something like even the flashcard or a flashcard application and see if you can, how would you get something like this working on a Kubernetes setup. Now, the point is that Kubernetes is meant for things that really scale, in the sense that you want to be able to just create new containers that can handle certain kinds of requests, maybe scale the database, scale the front end, scale various other aspects, right? But the point is you have this huge number of different sort of interacting processes and managing. I mean, they call it orchestrating for a reason, right? I mean, managing an orchestra with like hundreds of musicians in it is a very tough task, right? And this is sort of trying to convey the same idea over here, right? And in that sense, actually speaking, you really need to think twice before you go down that path. So everything that we have looked at in these courses so far is primarily at a single user scale, right? So for the kind of things that you have, that's why in some sense we didn't really go into DevOps. It doesn't make too much sense to start talking too much about that before you understand what scale is and why you would even want to go for something of that sort, right? It's a natural extension of the idea of separation of concerns, right? All that we are doing is taking the different parts of the architecture and saying, okay, I'll have one particular container or service which is handling the database, another one which is handling the front end, another one which is handling load balancing, right? Do one thing, do it well, right? That's the core idea over there. But when you start sort of managing so many different services and each of them needs to sort of be running properly, talking to each other, it can get quite hard to even understand what is happening, let alone manage everything properly. And that is where something like SQLite really helps, right? I mean, there's no service at all involved over here. It's just a file which is there. It is completely in memory and very nicely sort of fits in with what you have in the rest of your system. Okay. And as Tej said, that's basically why you would see it in all the Android applications and things like that. It really makes sense over there because on your phone, you need to have some way by which you can store data. And at the same time, it's not something with a lot of overhead. It can store it conveniently and compactly and allow you to use it nicely. Okay. So yeah, all of these things are important to keep in mind, especially when you're reading more about the new technologies and, this is the latest development and why aren't you using this? Well, you really need to think about, do you need to use it, right? You don't complicate unnecessarily. That's, I think, an important thing to keep in mind. Don't jump to a new technology just because it sounds cool. Make sure you understand what it gives you and what are the problems you are going to run into because of it. Okay.
I just wanted to ask a follow-up question regarding this SQLite.
Sure.
Sir, I had noticed that whenever I used SQLite on Replit, after using it in the Replit application, if I download it to my local PC and then try to maybe use DB browser to browse that, it would invariably show that database disk image is malformed and I would not be able to work with it. So is that a Replit specific issue?
It could be mostly, I think, when you downloaded the whole file might not have downloaded. One way to do it is on Replit, go to the console and check probably the size or the hash. Just create a SH5 or MD5 hash of the file. And once you download it, you generate the hash again and compare it. Sometimes, these platforms don't allow you to download properly. So some of the bytes might be missing. So the file might be corrupted, but usually you should transferring it like a file should be okay. The only difference is while you are transferring, while you're copying the paste, there shouldn't be a write lock on it, because if something is writing and it's also being copied from one place to another place, and there could be corruptions at that point.
Got it, sir. Got it.
Also, I
And
mean, yeah, I assume you have checked the version numbers and you are using the same SQLite 3 or whatever in both cases. And that would be the other possible reason, but I guess it's unlikely you are using SQLite 2 anywhere. So, but
no,
just
sir,
thought I'd
it's
mention.
SQLite 3.
Right. That shouldn't be, but I think as Tej said, in that case, it's probably to do with having downloaded properly. I think, in fact, as he said, right, sometimes if you just look at the file size, it might look like the same size. That doesn't necessarily mean the content is the same, because some of these files, what they do is they just create a file of a given size and then sort of populate it internally with a different structure. So you have to make sure you are using something like an MD5 sum in order to make sure that what is on Replit and what got downloaded are the same.
Okay, sir. Okay. And one last question, sir. As I was mentioning about the survey that I saw, it says that JavaScript completes its 9th year in a row as the most commonly used programming language. Now, my question is it only because JavaScript is like the most popular language used in the web, or are there some applications outside web which are also included?
I mean, surely it is very popular on the web. I mean, that's probably the only, I mean, what they say the language de facto of the web, right? It's the only language that runs on the browser. So of course it adds up the numbers, right? Like the number of browsers.
Yeah, but maybe I should rephrase my question. What I meant was the fact that JavaScript is the most common language on the web. Is that the only reason for it being so popular, or are there other applications beyond the web as well?
I mean, see, backend node applications are also very popular. They are becoming more and more popular also because, the one thing that software industry also looks like, how do we achieve more things by knowing less, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so one way of doing it is, if you can develop everything that you have to using the language you already know. So that's how, it led to the development of Node.js, because you already knew JavaScript. And if we could do the programming in front end, why couldn't we use the same language in the back end? And so you could develop backend APIs too. That's how, the spread of the JavaScript happened on the back end too. And it is actually becoming more and more popular on the back end too, especially in the web development environment. So, I mean, even that would have added a lot of numbers to this.
Got it, sir. Got it. Thanks for the response, sir.
And someone was saying about WASM. WASM doesn't have to be just JavaScript. You could actually code in any other language, many other languages. It could be Rust or let's say C++, and you could actually compile it to be a WASM that can be loaded in the browser. It is not same as the JavaScript. JavaScript actually gets like, it's a scripting language, so it gets compiled at the runtime, and then bytes are loaded, and then it kind of runs. WASM is actually pre-compiled and comes as a binary download, right? It comes as a whole binary file. So there are lots of differences, but yes, WASM is also becoming more popular as a runtime environment within the browser, where probably you could use lots of other languages to code for the browser. But that's something still in the early stages of its life.
Right. And yeah, I think WASM, I mean, as the name indicates, it's more meant closer to be an assembly language. So it's unlikely that you will directly write code in WASM. Right. So you will always, as they said, probably write in Rust or C++ or whatever and have a compiler. I mean, maybe even JavaScript to WASM, right? I mean, you could even have that. The point is that you have a compiler that takes the program that you have written and converts it into something else. There are a lot of interesting developments out here. And see, as they said, right, JavaScript, the reason why it's popular is to a large extent also because of people. If someone says they know JavaScript, they can essentially be expected to contribute in multiple parts of the thing. Whereas if someone says they know Haskell, then unless you find somebody else who's also developing in Haskell, you are limited there, even though the language might be much more powerful in certain ways. So yeah, popularity of the language is not necessarily because it is the best language. Having said that, I mean, people also tend to trash JavaScript a lot. I am not that much. I mean, I don't have that much of a problem with JavaScript. I think it has some nice features of its own, right? So I'm perfectly fine with it. There were, I mean, especially older versions of JavaScript had some really bad syntax problems, but it's it has some really powerful features of its own as well. Okay, so what you choose finally, I think as a completely independent of this course, I also feel that it is a nice thing to try and learn some other languages as well, just for contrast, right? To sort of know different ways of looking at solving a problem. Okay.
Sir, I have. Hi, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, can I request?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I have some request that is it possible to demo something like that Wasm? We know that that Wasm first we convert like some particular project I made on the C++, Python, or the Java, anything which is faster, and then we do in the binary and we put on the front end side. So I have seen in the some company website and they are using very efficiently this particular language. So if there will be a small demo for us, so because we are going in the data science and 100% we are going to sometime we need to use that data science some project on the front end, which is not possible to write in the JavaScript due to they need so much processor and something. So is it possible to run a small demo and for that Wasm, how can the basic application, how can we integrate? So further we can go and study and we can develop.
Okay, let me put it this way. In the context of this course, I would say that it's sort of well, out of scope, right? I mean, in the sense that that would take us down a fairly complicated route if we start that. But more importantly, see, Wasm by itself, like we said, it's not something which I mean, you would not write code directly in that. You would use some other language, but then it starts becoming highly language specific. So the Rust to Wasm compiler, for example, the process of how to build an app in that, how to load it, and so on. I versus what you would do for JavaScript to Wasm or Go to Wasm, all of those would be like slightly different approaches. Yeah, I think maybe we can see if there is some way that we can sort of think about a demo, but just to add, see, even though you're saying data sciences and so on, Wasm is not directly trying to solve the problem of necessarily high performance computing. Okay, so let's say that you wanted to get some really high throughput computation happening. You wanted to implement a machine learning algorithm or something on your completely in your browser. Wasm may not be the best way of doing it, right? Instead, even if you look at something like TensorFlow.js, right, which is basically a JavaScript version of the TensorFlow libraries, which are there in Python. That, in fact, directly makes use of calls to the GPU, right, the graphic processing unit, which is there in your system. So I think it uses some other APIs like WebGL and WebGPU in order to get even better performance than what you might get from directly compiling to Wasm. Okay, so I think we'll anyway look at it and see if there is a possibility of having some kind of demos with this thing. But right now, okay, I'm not sure about that. Okay. Yeah. Sachin, there was another question. Sachin, go ahead.
Hello, sir.
Yeah,
sir, as they are introduced to send emails, but using the fake SMTP server, can you shed some light how to actually send emails using some services and SMS as it was discussed in the project? In the
real. So to send a real email, you just need to get the real account. For example, if you have a Google account, you could use your Google SMTP server. You can search for Gmail SMTP server, and you could use your Gmail username and password. And instead of giving the fake SMTP server's address, you could give this address and this password and this username, and you should be able to send real email. Or you could search for transactional email providers online, I'm sure there are many providers, third-party providers. You could register with any of them who have like a free allocation of emails, because usually sending emails is also an expensive stuff. So they charge you per 100 or per 1,000 emails. You could choose one of them, get details from them. They usually provide you what is the SMTP server URL, what is the SMTP port, what is the SMTP username and password. You could use that instead of the fake um, URL and port and username and password, and then you should be able to send the real email.
Yeah, in fact, I think with Gmail, so what happens is that you can even, they have what they call the app specific passwords, right? You don't need to use your standard Gmail password. You can create arbitrary password that is used only by one particular application, right? I mean, the idea is that you can revoke those passwords at any point without compromising your actual password. So in case accidentally that gets lost, it's easier to revoke it than go around changing your password and so on. One thing to generally, the other possibility apart from Gmail is, at least I have used at one point, this thing called SendGrid, right? Which also I think has, I mean, they have like fairly liberal free plans, something like 12,000 emails per month or something like that, right? 12,000 emails per month is quite a lot for an individual user, but if you are trying to send like spam emails or a newsletter or something, it will, you'll quickly run out of those credits, right? So be careful. That's the only thing. I mean, it shouldn't be that you start sending out emails in bulk, because then you are very likely to get your account flagged, even if it is your Gmail account. And you try sending too many emails in a short amount of time, you are very likely to get flagged and run into problems.
Correct. That's why I think I've given the example of dummy one, so that you can experiment on dummy ones as much as possible, and then when you are ready to go live, then you can change the parameters to the real one.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
I mean, SendGrid is of course one grade. There is Send in Blue. There are many. You should, most of them I think might give free access. I've used SendGrid, and the other way to use it is SendGrid also provides you a web-based API. If you don't want to use an SMTP-based API, if you want to use a web-based API, they also give you a web-based API. You could use that. I've not dealt with a web-based API in my screencast because it's like using any other web API. They'll give you an API key, they'll give you an endpoint and some parameters you could post there, and it should send an email. I've dealt with the SMTP because it's an open protocol and it's easier to shift from provider to provider. Today, if you want to use, SendGrid, tomorrow you want to use something else, it's always easier to change. That's one of the uses of using open protocols like SMTP.
Okay, sir. Sir, is that same for sending SMSs also, or like using Google Chat that was discussed a webhook?
So I've not dealt with the SMSs because it's usually when you have to register at the provider, and then the provider will actually give you a URL where you do a web post to send an SMS. And again, there are many providers like Text Local .in, which gives you like up to 25 SMSs for free when you register. And there are many other Indian providers also give you some kind of accounts with some credit to try it out. Most of them will have just a web API where you can post to send an SMS. Usually you will have a API key, API URL, and two mobile number, including the country code, and then message that you can send. Just make a web call to send an SMS. Since it's not very different from any other SMS sending, I've not actually I've not introduced that as any special thing. In terms of the web sending a chat webhook message, I think even that is like just a post message. Maybe we can put some couple of screenshots, Abhishek, in the discourse, how to find the URL of the
Sure.
and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
and people could use it. Basically, even there, it's just a post, like a webhook post to send a message. So it's not that difficult from using any other API. We'll put some information on the discourse which you could use.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time.
So are there any other questions? So no one seems to have any other questions. So shall we move to the feedback part if they have any?
Sure. Yeah. I think that's fine. Absolutely. I mean, so is there a specific way of collecting feedback, or are you
I
asking for
think they
feedback?
can just raise their hands and yeah, one by one we can have their.
Yeah. I mean, I thought that was open even now, that anybody who wanted to give feedback would do. But yes, definitely, specific feedback, anything that you have with regard to the course is welcome, right? So please go ahead with that.
So if anyone of you has any specific feedback regarding the course and its contents, so please feel free to give us your valuable comments.
Abhishek, is there also any other way to send like a form to students so they can do it anonymously?
We can do this.
I mean, yeah, maybe I think not many would be comfortable speaking up.
Sure. Yeah, we'll create a form and we'll float it among all the learners.
Sure. Yeah, I think having an anonymous form might also be good in case somebody is uncomfortable about what they want to say. But please feel free, right? At any point. Yeah, Preeti, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was actually, I did type out a big comment. I thought the session would end and I just placed the comment before it ends. But thanks for giving the opportunity for taking feedback. I think I would like to remind you that I did provide feedback in the MAD1 course as well. And whatever I said then, I guess most of it is still valid now. Your lectures are mostly one shot. I just watch through them once and I get all of it. So that is something quite unique for this entire program. I don't think I've had to rewatch your lectures anytime. Also, a big thank you to Tejas sir. I did say that I had some audio issues in the MAD1 course with some of the screencasts, but that was only restricted to the MAD1 course. As of now, there are no issues. Everything is all fine. So yeah, and thanks to the entire course team, because these MAT courses, quite contrary to the acronym, these have been one of the most insightful and interesting courses that I've ever gotten till date in this BSc program, maybe apart from the CT course. So thank you to all everyone involved in this course, Professor Nitin Tej sir, Abhishek sir, Narendra sir, and everyone else here.
Thanks, Preeti. Very nice to hear that. And of course, we are also open to negative feedback. So it's very nice to hear the positive parts, but definitely thank you a lot for that.
I am generally quite skeptical, but as of now, I don't have anything negative to say about the course. I am really sorry. Course has been that good.
So I think one of the things that I also would want to tell is this. I mean, see, we try to cover the bases, but this course is never complete, right? It's going to change every day, and I think what we wanted to trigger was, ability to learn from with some base. Like now you have some ideas, and then ability to learn new things and build using those new things. I mean, as long as I think we kind of covered that, I think we should probably done a decent job. And yeah, I think buying a new Mac has paid, I guess.
Absolutely, sir. Just one suggestion. Now that you talk about future avenues, maybe after the course ends, maybe after the end term exams and all, a discourse post directing us as to where to learn further. For example, what programming languages to look next, or what frameworks to go through in the future. That would be a great idea, and it would also be great if we can still retain access to the discourse forums at least till we complete our degree. Because as of now, we still have access to the MAD 1 course. It would be great if we still have MAD 2 discourse access in the future.
Yeah, sure, Pradeep. So we'll check with it. Yeah, it was started from the last time itself. Oh, sorry, from this term itself, that the access for the previous discussion forums, they were not revoked from this term onwards. Hopefully, this will be continued for the next terms as well.
Sure. Thank you, sir. Thanks
Yeah,
to everyone for the course.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Abhishek. I mean, I think we should definitely take it up with JK and the other team members. It makes sense that the discourse forum access should continue, at least as long as they are enrolled in the course, possibly even. But in any case, apart from that, right? I mean, I think you, if necessary, you can get in touch with us over email directly as well. So that is always open. So please keep that. At the end of the day, you are IITM students at this point. You are always welcome to contact us. Unfortunately, I have not seen any of you in person, so I probably won't recognize you outright. You will need to probably send something to remind me that of the context and that you are a student in this course. But apart from that, you are always welcome to contact us at any point.
Yeah, same here. Yeah.
Param? Yes.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. Sir, I had a small request. The courses MAD 1 and MAD 2 have been amazing. But if it is possible for you from like all your schedules, in the future as well, like on the current technologies that like as they will evolve, can we have sessions in between some like probably scheduled even though the courses are completed, if it will be possible for both of you?
Yeah, I'm not sure what would be the best way to do that. I mean, I think I understand definitely, I mean, the idea sounds nice to me as well. Now, how do we organize this? Is it going to be actually as a live session?
Structure, but like once a month or twice a month, as and when you guys are free, probably that way.
I mean, we can think about it. I am not very sure what's the best way to take it forward, because even I mean, this course technically has like some 500 people enrolled in it, but in a live session, like we have less than 20 people over here, right? So, but I think that's as far as I'm concerned, that is still useful, because in some sense, the people who are over here are, I think, people who are finding the course interesting at least, and would have more questions to ask over there. So we'll definitely find ways to keep that channel open, that we can have further discussions, right? So I think it's not that, okay, we just taught this course and everything is done and finished. So how exactly do we do it? Do we have regular sessions, or is it based on some kind of, we maybe have a few discussions on discourse or other forums and then see whether to have a live session once in a while? That's definitely possible. We can have kind of seminars and things like that. I think that we can do that.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, one question on the chat: are there plans to convert the live lectures of this course to recorded lectures? Yeah, I mean, they will be re-recorded. I think the part of the reason for having them live this time around was also some of the scheduling, and it needed to be done in that way. But yeah, I think we would prefer to have it as recorded, and we will be doing that. Yeah, all of that, of course, will still be available to all of you at some point. So, yeah.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought long and hard, and the only negative thing I could come up regarding the course was those like the lack of activity questions and, for example, subtitling support for the live lectures. So apart from
Okay.
that, I don't think anything else was negative about the course.
Yeah,
Also maybe it would have been great to have some programming assignments like we did last time. That
Right,
can be a
right,
good
yeah.
addition.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think as far as Mat 2 was concerned, the assignments, I mean, we had a lot of discussions initially on, how we should set up assignments, and this whole business of auto-graded assignments was turning out to be too tricky. I mean, even in Mad 1, it was not trivial because, testing things like how do you write HTML and CSS, there are so many different ways of doing it that I think it did run into some problems, but at least it was sort of tractable. Now with things like Vue, which is almost completely visual, it becomes even harder to sort of have automated assignments that way. Having said that, I think we sort of have a better handle on maybe how to handle it, at least give the assignments out and not necessarily have them as graded. There are a couple of different ways that we want to approach this, but yeah, I think there will be some evolution moving forward. So that's something that we are looking at. Yeah, the difficulty of the quizzes is also something, again, it's, I think at some point we are iterating through it. Where should we position it is something that we're looking at. So yeah, I think the feedback is definitely appreciated. Thanks. Okay, so yeah, any other questions or close for now?
So yes, I mean, we'll float the Google form on all of the students of this course, and yeah, we'll get that feedback from them.
Great, that sounds good, Abhishek. Thanks a lot. And thanks everyone for attending. Thanks Sage for joining as well. And yeah, all the best with your exams and future.
All the best. Yep. Bye-bye.
So just an ending note for all of you. It's been a great journey with all of you since the start of the Mat 1 course, and of course a quite neat experience for for all of us interacting with you all here. So I guess since this session is expected to be the last live session of this course for the correct term, you can of course still reach out to us via discussion forums or over emails. So at last, of course, means best wishes from our side to all of the learners who are currently enrolled in this course, may not be necessarily joining this call and maybe might be watching this session later on the YouTube. So at last, yeah, big thanks for all of the cooperation throughout the journey.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the course. Thank you for the great experience in the past 2 terms. We are all grateful. And best of luck to all of you for the future runs of the course as well.
Thanks a lot. It means a lot for us.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Thanks for joining the session. Thanks. So I guess we can formally close the session.